We hope that it's been entertaining. It's been informative. It's been a thing. I don't know. I don't get anything else.
Welcome to AT Banter, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything regarding the world of assistive technology. With our hosts, Steve Barkley, Rob Minot, and Ryan Fleury. Now, let's banter.
Hey, and welcome to yet another episode of AT Banter. I am Rob Minot, and with me today is Steve Barkley.
Hello.
And not Ryan Fleury. Ryan Fleury is, right now, he's got his feet up somewhere, probably in his living room.
He's probably being distracted by the ghost of Christmas past right now.
Probably, yeah. Is that like a euphemism for alcohol?
Could be.
But he's at home. He's on vacation this week. And we have a special guest in the studio today. We have Dr. Gary Birch, who is the executive director of the Neil Squire Society. He's come in to the wilds of Burnaby. Oh, wait, no, I guess you work in the wilds of Burnaby, don't you?
I do, yes.
All right, well, so there you go. He's a neighbor. Gary, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. I look forward to having a chat with you guys today.
So now you and Gary, you guys kind of go back a ways, don't you?
Oh, we've crossed trails a number of times over the years. I don't know. How long have you been with Neil Squire Society, Gary?
Well, I've actually been with the Neil Squire Society before we were incorporated, so well over 30 years now.
Wow. And I go back with Aroga for 25, so...
Wow.
So we've crossed paths many times.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess, well, let's just start out. What can you tell us? What is the Neil Squire Society and what do they do?
Well, the Neil Squire Society is a national not-for-profit society, and we use knowledge, technology, and passion to empower Canadians with disabilities. It all began way back with a young man named Neil Squire, who had a spinal cord injury very high up, and back in, this would be about 1982-ish, and trying to think how many details you need, but he got connected with the founder of the Neil Squire Society, a man named Bill Cameron, who was very involved in technology out at Triumph, and wanted to see Neil do more than just lie in a hospital bed. And I met Bill Cameron as I was finishing off my undergrad in electrical engineering, and he was looking for volunteers to work with him to help Neil use an Apple IIe computer. And
state of the art.
Well, it was in those days, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It was it had a whole 64K RAM in it.
Massive.
And I was excited at this opportunity. And as the summer came, I worked that summer. I think it was about 80. Yeah, it would have been 1981, in fact. And me and a couple others worked with Neil, and he learned how to use Morse code, sip and puff switch, puff for a dot, sip for a dash, to fully control his Apple IIe computer. And by the end of the summer, he was doing fantastically. And I was looking at, in those days, the best, if you weren't at school, you did correspondence. And he started a correspondence course at university. And we kind of thought, wow, he's done and he's on his way. And that was a pretty cool summer. Turns out, though, that a lot of other people who had severe disabilities saw what Neil was doing and wanted to do likewise. And long story short, it turned into the Neil Squire Society.
Now, you guys were the original developers of the JOUS, the mouth-controlled joystick with SIP-Puff for Morse code through it as well, and a byte switch around it as well, as I recall the original.
Wow, good memory. Yes. Yeah, from the very, as the Neil Squire Society grew, we always had an R&D group. It's been down to 2 or 3 people at a time, and sometimes it's been as big as 15 or so people. Working on various interface devices to help people with disabilities use primarily computer-based technologies. And as DOS got phased out and Windows came into being, we had a number of, mostly in those days, high-level quadriplegics that were doing really well with DOS. And as soon as the Windows came out, they had no way of navigating the graphical user interface. And so we developed the JAWS, which allowed a quadriplegic to, it's just a joystick that fit in the mouth to move the cursor around, and there was a sip and puff. The shaft of the of the joystick was hollow and allowed them to do sip and puff, both to click and drag and do all those kinds of functions, as well as for those that use Morse code, they could also use the same device to do Morse code. Nowadays, that's rare. People still use the JAWS. It's licensed and sold by a company called CompuSalt in Newfoundland. Most people, though, today, because voice recognition input has got so much better and is relatively inexpensive, most people go that way.
Right.
But yeah, that was a long time ago and still sold today, so it's kind of fun to look back, see some success there.
Yeah. And it's in its third generation now, I think. Isn't it?
Yeah. They've redesigned it. They being CompuSalt has redesigned it a few times to take advantage of newer technologies and cheaper ways of building it, etc.
Right.
And there's actually a lot of really interesting things sort of on the horizon in terms of alternate access. We did a show not too long ago about BCIs, right? But the brain-computer interfaces and sort of some of the cutting edge stuff that they're doing on that. Have you guys thought about any of that stuff, or what's your general opinion of?
Well, I don't know if you were reading my bio or not, but that sounds like a leading question. When I did my PhD in electrical engineering, that's exactly what I did. That would have been back in between 83 and 88. I started working on measuring signals from the brain using EEG with the desire to develop an interface that could use the signals directly from the brain to control devices. And I thought that would be the ultimate interface. And I did my PhD on that topic. Oh. And then after that, I still am to this day an adjunct professor out at electrical engineering electrical and computer engineering now at UBC. And I've kind of wound it down now, but for many years I had a number of grad students that continued my work. So I was very involved with brain-computer interface, and I you can see a lot of hype on the media about it.
Yep.
There's still a lot of big challenges before it's going to be really usable on a practical day-to-day level, and there's still approaches where they're measuring signals like I did off the surface of the scalp, and there's some investigators, particularly in the States, that are going right into below the scalp, right into the cortex.
Right.
There's some real upsides and downsides to that approach as well. But I expect someday that will be a very viable interface and probably be used by able-bodied people too, for certain. But it's hard to say how. I think it's still quite a ways off.
Right.
But you see some media that makes you think that it's sooner than that. But I would not be too. I want to be hopeful, but I don't want people in the short term to think that brain-computer interface is something going to be practical in the near term.
Yeah, I think a lot of the hype, you see people controlling different devices with these head-worn systems, and what they don't tell you is that they had to apply a gel, and they have to reapply the gel every so often to keep the contact to the scalp, and it's just not it's not a practical technology yet.
Yeah, and even then, and there has been some, and that's interesting to bring up that issue because there's been some great work just reading up on it on so-called dry electrodes that don't need the gel.
Oh yeah,
and for a long time people have been working on those, but recently I've seen some reasonably priced electrodes that do seem to function fairly well that don't require the gel. So those are some of the issues that need to be overcome. But still, when you see those little video clips, you don't see what happens in the times it didn't work so well. And often there's a thing with brain-computer interface. It's like a lot of interface scenarios, like what happens when a person's not trying to control. It's kind of like the problem with voice recognition. you leave your voice recognition on and then you answer a phone call from your mom, then it types out all the stuff. So, how does a brain-computer interface know when to control and when to ignore? And
right.
So when they show you the clip of it controlling something, that's great, but you like to see what's going on when they're just sitting there thinking about something else and watching the robotic arm move all around.
That's right.
Yeah. But, someday, and, that's the exciting part is, technology has always got the potential to be a real enabler. And the thing I talk a lot about these days is it's also got the potential to be new barriers, because as new technology comes out, often not very much thought, if any, has been given to whether something would be accessible. And it goes right back to that example around the JAWS. When when Windows came out to replace DOS, no one had a thought of how that would put people with disabilities behind. Not only did it really put people with limited mobility issues way behind, it really wiped out people who have low vision or were blind.
Yeah.
It was a completely new world. And in some ways, I'm not sure they've completely got, there's some pretty sophisticated screen readers and stuff now, but
there's a steep learning curve to
curve
those sorts of systems.
But anyways, so as technology evolves, it sometimes also brings new barriers, and
right.
So I'm a big advocate of thinking through those barriers first before the technology is launched, right? So,
like, what is the actual barrier to a real workable, practical, say, BCI?
That's a long.
There's probably
the
more
answer's
than one.
long. I
Stay
can give
tuned
it
for
to
part
you.
2 of the podcast.
I'll probably put 80% of your audience to sleep, but there's still what I call signal processing issues. Because you're measuring a lot of signal from the brain, and you have to figure out which part is the part you need, and the parts that there's a lot going on in the brain all the time, right?
Right.
So there's that problem, and there's just the practical problems that Steve was talking about in terms of how do you actually measure the signals and do it in a way that's sustainable? Because after a while, some of these electrodes start to hurt the skin and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the systems still require a lot of very, like a technician to sort of set them up and tweak them and get the parameters set optimally. So it's just a lot of little problems that need to be solved. And they cross a number of boundaries. So
got it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these headsets that are on the market now, like the emotive headset that we talked about, from what I understand from my reading, is that the main problem with those is that the EEG, it's very surface level readings, and so you have limited control. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a few commercial ones out there. Most of I think that one, Emotive, is it?
Yeah,
it's out of Australia, I believe.
Yeah. You have to be careful. Like a lot of them are, they got the electrodes mostly over the forehead and
right
around the eyes and stuff. So you can pick up other biological signals, like eye movement in particular is very easy to measure. So, and then muscle movement around the eyes and facial muscles, EMG they call it, shows up really. They're all an order of magnitude larger than the EEG. So that's actually a problem because that actually contaminates the EEG signal. So, but people have learned to get control out of that, but they're not actually using the EEG. They're learning to move their eyes in a certain way, or they're learning to squint to control it with muscles and stuff. So they're getting control, but they're not really using EEG in a lot of these cases. There is something that is still intended for researchers and that kind of thing, but as the price points come down a lot and really is able to measure in a better way the EEG signal, and it's something called Open BCI. Mm-hmm. So if people are really interested, I would Google Open BCI. I'm surprised, frankly, just how well it does and how the price points come down on that. Again, though, it's really not intended for users yet. It's still aimed at researchers who want to get involved.
But even for that side, like, are there access applications that you could use, say, for a headset that could track? Because if it could track stuff like blinks or eye movement, could you not sort of translate that into some sort of alternate access device as opposed to like eye gaze systems or?
Oh, the short answer is absolutely. I mean, they've been measuring eye movement as a way of trying to control devices for a long time. And it's, again, there's a big calibration issue with eye movement and stuff. It gets a bit technical.
Right.
And you do need the same electrodes. So the eye gaze has actually, I think, become more, especially now they're starting to get the price point of the eye gaze down. But both eye gaze and measuring eye movement and even muscle movement, the trouble with that is, like I was explaining with the BCI, when you have unintentional eye movement and unintentional movement, you can sometimes, like, say you're controlling the cursor, suddenly the cursor's way off the screen. You didn't mean it to. You just
were daydreaming.
Yeah, or maybe you're trying to read what was on the screen or something. So, yeah.
I guess it would kind of overcomplicate things. I mean, there are existing, eye gaze systems out there that work perfectly fine. I guess.
They tend to be expensive, the ones that are really worth it. But if you really need it, I think a good eye gaze is the better way to go. You get nothing attached to your face.
Right.
And it's got, some approaches to deal with what I was just talking about, mostly dwell and that kind of stuff, or someone can use a switch, use a single switch to click or something like that. But yeah.
We did a show recently with a fellow who's a developer of a product called the Smile Mouse. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, it uses a webcam. It tracks your head movement, and it works a lot like, the systems where you're wearing a dot on the forehead.
Okay. Sure. It's like a head tracker bit.
Yeah, but it's just tracking head movement, and when you want to click, you just smile.
Right.
Yeah.
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 No. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and because the technology is becoming so accessible and so relatively inexpensive, you're seeing, I don't even want to call them hobbyists, but they're technology people or people that are interested in using technology. And they're doing some clever things. Sometimes, not always, they don't always understand the whole context of the problem they're trying to solve, but still very creative, innovative stuff. And it's very individual, something like the Smile Mouse might work really well for someone, and another person might find it very frustrating. So that's another thing we really believe at the Neil Squire Society, and I think you guys at Aroga practice the same thing. It's very much about, making sure the user's at the center of these kind of things and making sure the user gets the kind of technology that works best for them in their context of their life. Yeah.
Yeah. What other products has Neil Squire developed? I know you guys have done a lot more than even the ones that I've seen.
Well, we've worked on a lot of devices and prototypes, not all of which have made it commercially. In the early days, we did a lot of software around scanning software and Morse code and that kind of thing. More recently, for a while there, we had a very successful product and campaign, actually. It's called Speech Assisted Reading and Writing, which was a whole software literacy package that we developed in collaboration with what was then Capilano College and their adult literacy program. And it was a particularly good program at that. This was probably somewhere in the 90s, I'm losing track now, where people with disabilities who needed to get their basic literacy skills up could use we called it SARA, Speech Assisted Reading and Writing, to work on their literacy, and it was a very successful, well-used program until the sort of community college system caught up and was able to accommodate those kind of folks right in their own colleges. So it's kind of no longer used, but that was a very successful program for a long time. More recently, because of the rapid pace of change of technology, we sometimes we prototype proof of concepts But then we tried to work with industry or other partners to get that technology out, and or try to work with the mainstream manufacturers that are, say, developing smartphones and that kind of thing, to ensure that certain standards, input-output standards like USB connections. On a smartphone, you see a USB on a lot of smartphones, but that might just be a charging port. But on some phones, it might be a true USB where you can actually then connect up an assistive technology like some other kind of mouse, like a JAWS, or something now we're working on called a lip sync, which is just a smaller portable version of that. So it's more trying to make, rather than trying to develop technology, because it's changing so fast, we found that we would develop a technology and then the platform itself would change so quickly that we backed away, not completely, but we have backed away from the retrofit kind of model, because by the time you get a retrofit solution, whatever you're trying to interface has changed. And so you're back to so that was kind of a hard lesson that we went through. And now we work with regulatory bodies, we work with industry as much as we can to try to ensure that the technology comes out either accessible from the get-go or is designed such it could be easily made accessible.
Right. Yeah, you're not alone in that issue of retrofitting platforms.
It's been a big problem.
Yeah, a lot of the augmentative communication companies went to mainstream tablets as part of their communication solutions, and it was just a disaster because the product cycles are 6 months, and then they've got to, come up with a new case and come up with, new interfaces, and
it's it's created a whole new issue of problems. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the latest thing that we're working on is, I encourage you, if you're interested, to go to our website to find more about it. But we developed a few years ago something called a lip sync, which we developed as a much more portable version of the JAWS, and we couldn't find a path to get it commercialized. And then recently we had an opportunity with Google, one of their Google competitions out of the States, and so we've got this grant now from Google to work on making the lip sync open source and making use of and this is a whole world that I'm not that familiar with, but all the young folks around me seem to be maker communities and maker hackathons and that kind of stuff. So we've redesigned it so it's going to be very easily built on 3D printers and simplified the electronics so that these maker clubs and that kind of stuff can make these things much more cheaply and locally, and hopefully can, with the actual person that needs it, connected to them. So not only are they getting the device made, but they're getting it made and then set up for them in a way that they can use it. Nice. And so we're kind of excited. It's kind of like the open source software and how that's been a real step forward for a lot of people with disabilities, because the software that used to be very expensive, or you have to have a dedicated piece of hardware, the open source software has been very helpful in many cases, but there hasn't been the equivalent for the hardware. So we're looking at this as kind of like the open source hardware model. And
interesting.
Yeah. So we're very excited about this because we think it could be a big important new way of getting hardware assistive technology out to people, particularly those who can't afford the mainstream kind of assistive technologies.
Right. Now you've got a maker program going on at Neil Squire now, don't you?
Well, that would be it.
Oh, that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just around that. Oh, yeah.
Well, right now it's focused on the lip sync. We're looking at opportunities to broaden that model, and we're not the only ones. There's lots of stuff out there on the internet where you can find printer code to print various assistive technologies. What I think we like to see is a more kind of coordinated, vetted approach where people with disabilities have actually tried certain designs and refined and have a place where people can go and find these designs. And then, of course, the beauty is every maker club has got the ability to innovate and find new solutions, and it's kind of like that open source model. They will give that back. Hey, we found a better way of doing this, and send it out to community, and everyone benefits. But
nice.
It'd be interesting to see where it goes, for sure. It could be quite exciting.
Yeah, indeed. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was your work with the United Nations.
Yeah, that's been very, very exciting, and very honored to be involved. It was this past June 2016. I was asked by the government not to go to represent them, but to go. I was funded by the government to go down and represent Canadians with disabilities at the UN for the week where they were reviewing the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I think they do it every year, but every year they focus on different themes. And this year, one of the themes that we're focusing on was technology. And they did that, which is very cool because technology is actually written right into the UN Convention, which I was very happy to see. It's a very good convention, actually. Excellent. And I was there about 4 years prior when they did the first sort of review of the technology. The first time there, it was wow. There's a lot going on. It's very political. It's very there's sort of very diplomatic rules of engagement and lots of meetings that you wonder if anything's really getting accomplished. But there's a lot of these, what they call side events, which are really just smaller meetings, and some really good discussions take place there. And then when I went back this June in 2016, I really started to see how it has really engaged a lot of countries around the world, a lot of developing countries, and they're really making some interesting strides, you know. So I came away this time feeling much more like, wow, this convention is really having some real effect. And I had the honor actually of being elected by my peers to chair a roundtable on the topic of assistive technology and technology. And I thought that was very cool to be leading the roundtable panel. And what I didn't realize, it was actually in one of the main auditoriums with all the various reps from the various countries were there, and as well as what they call social society, civil society, which is really what they call the NGOs that are there. And so it was in this big auditorium, and after all the panelists said their little presentations around technology, it was my job to then call on the different countries who wanted to make comments or interventions. So it's kind of fun to recognize Australia, you're next. And they had all these diplomats whispering in my ear, you got to recognize France next, or I actually don't remember which, but there's all this kind of politicking going on in the background.
A bit of a pecking order.
Oh yeah, and you know there's an ambassador from so and so here, so he's got to go first. But it was, you know, so that was just kind of fun. I came away feeling like it's hard to say what effect it's really having in Canada, to be very honest, but you can see it's really having some effect in some of the other countries around the world. Yeah.
Right. When you say technology is represented in the convention, what does that actually mean? How is it represented?
Yeah, okay, I should be able to tell you exactly what section, etc. It comes under the accessibility section, but it makes very explicit reference to technology and ICT, information and communication technologies in particular, need to be accessible. And so just the recognition that that's part of the accessibility lens includes technology in a very clear way, I think is just a real good step forward. And, you know, and I say it's I said, I'm not sure what difference it's making in Canada. It is, because it's got government focused on some of these issues for sure. I just think that because we're already trying to work on a lot of these issues, it's a little more subtle, and I'm now seeing more leverage points where I think the UN Convention in Canada is actually helping as well. But I think in some of these countries that we're starting almost from really nowhere in some cases, it's just easier to see the progress that's made for them.
So that segues nicely into your work with the Canadians with Disabilities Act.
Right. Yeah. Minister Carla Quattro, in her mandate letter, she's the Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities, from the Prime Minister, in her mandate letter was to put together a Canadians with Disabilities Act, which she refers to as renamed as it's National Accessibilities Act, I think is the working title right now. And just trying to put more of the focus on accessibility in the broadest sense of the term, rather than sort of focusing on disability. I think that's her thinking behind that. So it's just a more inclusive kind of way of looking at it, and not putting the problem on the disability, but putting it's more of the issue of how do we make our country more inclusive and accessible. And so right now they're in the consultation stages. They've been holding public consultations all across Canada. They've also been having some focus consultations on specific topics. And actually, if you haven't been involved, you can go to the website. I'm sure if you go to, I'm sure if you just Google the Canadian Disabilities Act or something like that, it would come up. I think there's the Office of Disability Issues federally. I'm sure there's a link on that page, and you can go on to the website there, and there's 2 or 3, I think, options for you to get your 2 cents in, and they're really encouraging that. They're really listening. I really get the sense that they're listening very carefully and really trying to figure out what they can do. There are jurisdictional issues of what a federal act can do versus, say, maybe a provincial act or something like that. So It gets kind of technical, but I think we're going to see there appears to be some real dedication and some real desire to see something real come out of this. So I'm quite excited, and the engagement so far has been very encouraging.
And I guess in some jurisdictions like Ontario, they already have a Disabilities Act in place.
Yep. Yeah. And, I've heard great things, and I've heard a lot of criticisms about it too, but I think that's the way that kind of legislation works. And I think in Canada, with the kind of federalism we have, we need both. We need a federal act, and we need ultimately similar acts, hopefully not too different in all the provinces, because just because different issues around disability and accessibility and inclusion come under different jurisdictions. So we need some harmonization and coordination, I guess, around those things. But I think the federal government can show a lot of leadership by putting this into place, and if it goes well, it should dovetail nicely with the act in Ontario. And there's now an act.
Manitoba has one, I believe.
There's one in Manitoba, and Nova Scotia's definitely they've tabled their legislation. It's very close to, I think, being, it may even be passed, or it's about to be passed. So it's happening. And I think that's going to be the new landscape for Canada, hopefully, is a strong federal legislation that dovetails nicely with provincial legislations that ensure that inclusion and accessibility is there for all persons with disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, what's your general feeling? Like, I know for me, I feel like the last 5 years, there's been some real strides in terms of conversations about inclusion and getting traction on universal design, much more so than in the past 20. I mean, would you agree with that?
There's definitely more discussion, but some of the deep-rooted issues that I've seen over my 30 plus years are still there.
Yeah.
You know, the individuals not wanting to identify as a person either with a disability or even a person that is running into barriers. Some of that's are often fear-based, and that they're going to get some repercussion, some discrimination. Like, you know, I've seen programs that are ready and willing and able to help people with disabilities or people that may not even identify as being people with disabilities, but are truly running into barriers in the workplace, and they're too afraid to say anything about it because they're afraid that if they do, there might be repercussions. And
Right.
sometimes that's actually not true. The employer might be super supportive. They're just so there's those issues. There's still employers that there's a lot of employers, you know, that are still really, they're starting to talk a lot more about employment and that kind of stuff, but they really haven't. There are some great examples of employers out there that are doing it really well, but there's a lot of employers that are still, I think they want to do it, and they're starting to understand that there's a whole business case to it as well.
Right.
A positive business case, but we're still fighting some pretty fundamental myths and misconceptions and those kind of things. So the discussion's good, and right. I agree with you. I think there's more going on, and there's more talk about universal design and hiring people with disabilities and all that kind of stuff. But we still got to push past that.
Right.
Attitudinal. I think it's probably one of the key pieces still to go.
Right.
Yeah. So I hope all this discussion, like you pointed out, because I think it is happening more, does lead to some real change, you know, and after being involved in this field for over 30 plus years, sometimes it's very hard not to get too jaded about some of these things, but I still do my best to look at the positives that are going out there and try to build on those.
Yeah. And I think that one of the key differences right now is it's so much easier for people to build like online communities and have these online discussions than it has been. Like, but, you know, Facebook, Twitter, you know, all these avenues that people have to make their voice heard. More and more people with disabilities are sort of banding together, or they're entering into things like YouTube and having, you know, very successful, popular YouTube channels where they're able to sort of eliminate misconceptions and advocate for themselves. And, you know, that's certainly different than 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm old enough to admit that I don't fully understand the power of all this, but I have seen some examples of that. Yeah. I really have. Right. Just, you know, people getting their message across better, right, and more grassroots voices getting heard, and right to, if someone goes to a place of business and doesn't get the kind of accessibility or service they think is appropriate, you know, they can start talking about it on some sort of social media. And I've seen action happen way faster than I have through any human rights legislation or anything.
Sure.
You know, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Give me a call. We'll see if you can't fix that. You know? No one likes the bad social media out there. So
that's true.
Yeah. So it is powerful, and it's hard for me to know anyways, what impact that's had, but I'm sure it's had a significant impact. Yeah.
We haven't really touched on the At Work program all that much.
Well, yeah, the Neil Squire Society was very pleased and fortunate to win a contract with the BC provincial government to carry out a project called Technology at Work. And it's designed to help those with disabilities who are experiencing a workplace barrier at work, so people that are currently working or volunteering, or those that have a solid job offer or volunteer opportunity, and they need technology or other accommodations so that they can continue to do their work effectively and in the most productive way possible. So that can be someone that is at work and has maybe worked for quite a while and starting to acquire a disability, either through illness or repetitive strain or back injury or vision starting to go, and, you know, is experiencing those kind of barriers, we can help with those. We have money to resources to help both the employer and the employee, and depending upon the situation and of the employer, we ask them to contribute to the solution as well. And it's a very exciting program, because up until this program, I wasn't aware of a program that actually helps those who are currently in the workforce. There are programs around through Work BC where someone looking for work can get that kind of support, but someone that's actually working was actually not eligible for that. Well, there are some circumstances they could have been, but generally not. So this way we can be proactive with people who are in the workplace and for whatever reason starting to experience workplace barriers, and help them. So encourage people to go to our website and find out more about that as well. And because I think it's an important service that many people can take advantage of.
Well, let's talk about your Paralympic career.
My Paralympic career. Well, I was injured back in 1975, and I just finished high school, and was a very active kid. Did all the high school sports, and as I was going through rehab, people from the wheelchair sports community connected with me, and it was a great way to get re-engaged and being physically active, and just also being active in the world generally, and so I really enjoyed it. I got involved in track and swimming and field, as they call it, and did well enough that I made the Canadian team. And in 1980, had the opportunity to go to the Olympics, which were in Holland that year, and I won a silver in track and 2 bronze medals in the pool.
Nice.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a great chapter of my life. And actually, when I got back from the Olympics, there was a new game that was getting started for quadriplegics who weren't able to play basketball, wheelchair basketball. And in those days, we called it murder ball.
Yes.
Right.
And it's still, I think, a better name for it, but it's
I would
now
agree.
known
I've
as
watched it.
wheelchair rugby.
Yeah.
And I was one of the first. I wasn't obviously the one that invented it, but I was one of the first to play it.
Oh my God.
And I had a lot of fun in it. Until I got so involved in my graduate work at UBC, I think I finally backed away from that too. But that was a lot of fun. It also got a little scary near the end, but I don't know if anyone's if you ever haven't seen even a little bit of it, it's worth pulling up on YouTube and watching some of these guys going at it.
Oh yeah, There's no holds barred in that sport.
Yeah,
it's full on masochistic.
Yeah, it really is.
But I made a lot of good friends from those days, and still have them, and yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
So is there, is there a technology or even just a product that's come out in the last little while that you're really excited about, or that you really feel like is a little bit of a game changer? It's probably not all that new. In fact, I just saw a commercial where these millennials are talking something about, nothing's changed on these smartphones for 10 years. I still think of them as these incredible, but from an engineering point of view, the kind of technology that's in those things and the cost is actually, given what's in those things, is just amazingly low. And the potential for people with disabilities, I think we've only just started to tap the real potential of those. The Apple products got the voiceover, which is for many people who are blind, they love that interface, and it's really opened up a lot of, and they're using, Braille readers and all sorts of things to connect by Bluetooth. It's got the ability, you can use it to buy things and do e-commerce, which I think for some people is very
much easier than trying to deal with money and wondering if they're getting ripped off and all that kind of stuff. And
Ryan in our office is probably Amazon's biggest customer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, it's got the ability to, once you're interfaced to it for someone with, a severe mobility impairment, to use it to control their environment, with all the mainstream smart home stuff that's out there. They can control their lights, their doors, their television, all through this one device, so if you can get a good interface with that one device, it then becomes what I call a gateway, which interestingly enough, years ago, we built a gateway, we called it, way before anybody knew about even personal digital assistants, which were kind of the forerunner to the smartphones. We built this little terminal. It was portable, and a guy in a power wheelchair could move around his house and control different things. And it was really well liked. We just couldn't figure out how to commercialize it. So really, this has come to that point where you have this one device that can be a gateway to a number of things, both within your home and outside your home. It's not just a communication device, but it's a device that can allow you to do a whole host of things.
That's right. I think there's the Amazon Echo, I think, and it's the device that'll sit there. It's voice activated, and you can plug it into different environmental control systems. And that there's another, and Google has one too. I think it's the
I don't remember the name.
Google Home.
Yeah,
I might be wrong about that, but I mean, so there's a couple of products, that are,
well, those are kind of standalone products. There's a lot you can do through your actual smartphone.
Right.
I have not tried those. They look good on the commercials.
Yeah.
I still wonder, do they sometimes hear commands when you don't mean them?
Right.
And or don't hear a command when you really want it because you've got emotion in your voice, like something's like you need help.
There's a fire.
Yeah, that was one of the common. Now maybe they've beat that problem, but that was one of the big problems with voice recognition. And if you got too much emotion in your voice, like help or call 911 or something like that, it wouldn't recognize your voice like it would when you did it in a nice calm way. So, anyways, and then background noise has also been a big problem that they don't often talk about. You got the TV blaring or the stereo blaring or whatever.
Or a fire raging in your kitchen.
Yeah, and you're going, call fire department. Call fire department. Please call fire department. Yeah, I don't know. But, they're slowly making that stuff better. But I haven't tried it. But that's the kind of technology that's going to not just make, that what's beautiful about that, again, it's mainstream.
Yeah.
And so the cost will be way less. And it just brings back the same thing I think I've talked about a few times today. Let's make sure this new mainstream technology is always an enabler and not a new barrier.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they're getting better about it. I mean, Apple's always been very good with accessibility. Recently, Microsoft seems to be trying to gain some ground on them. They're really touting, their new update. They're really touting how much accessibility.
Yeah. You see it in a lot of the tech companies, Google as well.
Yeah.
And frankly, some of that is because they recognize it's both a market, and I think they recognize it's an important thing to do. But I also think some of the legislation in the States has nudged them in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But in a good way, because it's nudged them, and then I think they've seen the opportunity with the nudge to look for innovation and do some cool stuff with that. So, what's often good for people with disabilities turns out to be really good for the mainstream as well.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's what they're realizing.
Yeah. And that lesson's been learned over and over. And so you see that catching on. So,
well, you talked about that group out there that doesn't self-identify as being disabled.
Right.
And there's a lot of them out there. My mother's a prime example because she's got macular degeneration. Yep. She does not view herself as being blind, but she needs a CCTV to read anything.
Right.
And, built-in features like magnification, speech output. Once people learn that they're on there, they turn them on. They still don't have an identified problem, but they're
absolutely
suddenly magnifying it 4 times.
Sometimes you have to be sure that those features are there, but you're so right. Yeah. Yeah. And when they're more mainstream, they carry less stigma and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's great. Yep.
Yeah, and we're seeing it in even in the classroom now too. A lot of kids with low vision are sitting there, with their smartphones, snapping a picture of the board and then zooming in on it to read.
And now they're the cool kids because they got some of the coolest technologies, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's really flipped from being the the person with that really odd looking augmented communication device that's taking up half their wheelchair to some, I wish I had a cool device that did that too, kind of thing. So I think it shifted that dynamic a little bit too, which is very, very cool.
Yeah.
The times, they are a-changing.
Indeed. Oh, you got the Order of Canada. I didn't know you had the Order of Canada.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, that was a super honor that came. Well, it always is, because nominees are never supposed to know they've been nominated, right? So it was a super honor to be recognized. And especially when I've been around long enough that there's so many other people that I work with in the community that have dedicated their lives to trying to make things better for people with disabilities. And to be recognized for the work I've done is really amazing and humbling, really. And especially when you consider the number of other people that I think have done astounding work as well, and haven't had the opportunity to be recognized in that way. But it's something I take great pride in, and it's very, very quite an honor to be named as a officer in the Order of Canada. For sure. Yeah,
I think if I had that, I'd be wearing the medal everywhere.
Yeah, there's actually pretty well defined protocols of when you can wear, because I have a little one that's supposed to be on my vest, or like if I was in a suit jacket, I'm always supposed to have it on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just a little pin. Very few people know what it is. And then, of course, the big medal. I don't get invited to very many events where I'm supposed to be wearing that.
Yeah.
And they've got all these rules and regulations about when you can wear it and how to wear it. And
is it mostly like state functions? Or?
Yeah, black tie affairs, and
right.
I don't get, with the prime minister or something like that. Haven't been to many of those. Yeah.
They never invite me either. So.
Yeah, I know, me either. Still waiting for that invite.
That's right.
It's in the mail. And now, sorry, when were you awarded that? What year?
I think it was 2010. Don't hold me to that. Dr. Rita Hall and Michael Jean was the Governor General then, and it was a very cool ceremony, and then a really cool dinner that night, again back in Rita Hall. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was definitely a highlight in my life, and I was able to have my wife and my son there as well, and
nice.
And actually some other friends and family at the actual ceremony. So it was definitely one of the highlights of my life, and
awesome.
Like I said, a real honor to be recognized that way. But I also recognize there's a lot of other people out there that have done amazing work for people with disabilities, and it'd be nice if they all got recognized in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How does the nomination process work for that? Who gets to nominate people?
Well, I believe it's an open process that if you know of anyone, and you go onto the Governor General's website, and there's a process you have to follow. It's fairly rigorous, and then they go through quite a vetting process themselves, right? And I've been called upon since if I've, they ask me, do you know such and such a person? And if so, what would your input and recommendation be? Frankly, most of the time I don't know the people they're asking me about, but that's part of the vetting process that they go through.
Right.
But to nominate someone, I think there's a fairly clear process of how to go along. And I think it's a bit involved. There's a bit of work involved to it. And I have been involved in writing letters of support for some people who've been in the nomination process, but very, very strict. I think you would be disqualified if you let the nominee know even. So I had no idea. I just get this call out of the blue, and then I couldn't tell anybody. They said, it's not official until it's announced, on December such and such. So can't tell anybody. So,
that'd be torture.
So I walked, So for about a month, I knew, and I couldn't tell anybody.
That must have been killing you.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, but it's as much as some of us that have been around for a while look back and think, man, we're still fighting the same battles. It's still something that I get really excited about every morning, and pretty much every morning anyways. And I feel really blessed that I've been able to work in this area for so long, and I've had a lot of great opportunity for sure. Yeah.
And it's got to be really rewarding too, because you're involved at, with so many people, helping them overcome a lot of their barriers. Yeah. And it's really rewarding, I'm sure, to see that.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when you get kind of ground down because you're dealing with another piece of, you could argue, necessary or maybe not so necessary bureaucracy or whatever, and you're kind of wondering if this is really worth it. And then it's running into that person in the hallway who has just got some service or help from us and is saying, gee, you made just without this, this made a huge difference in my life. Or I remember one story in particular, this guy with cerebral palsy. I don't think he ever believed he could really work. And he was with us for a little while, and when he got his first job, and he came literally motoring down the hallway with his first paycheck, and he was so excited. I'll never forget that. But it's still, it's those little individual stories, and yeah, it's those that you go, okay, this is why we're here, right? And that's for sure what fuels it all. It's the individual stories. Yeah.
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 And I think we've all had a chance to see how certain interventions have made huge changes in people's lives, and it's fun to see that happen.
Yeah.
Where does Neil Squire have offices now?
Well, we've got our head office and sort of central BC office right here in Burnaby. And we have an office in Regina, an office in Ottawa, an office in Fredericton, Moncton, and recently we opened an office in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. So, and those are sort of except for New Glasgow, that was an opportunity that happened for us in the Maritimes not too long ago. But the other ones are all kind of historical, go way back to the roots of the organization where we had some critical mass and it stayed. But we've done a lot of reaching out through partners and distance technologies. One of our key programs called Computer Comfort. Not only do we do it on site in our offices, we do it by distance. And that's just a program where people can just get more comfortable using computers. And I always thought that would be a program that would die away. It was really one of the first programs of the Neil Squire Society, but it's just in demand today as it ever has been. And I think it's because of the evolving nature of the digital world, and people are always wanting to learn more. And it's a very interesting program, and because of we can do it at a distance, and we've figured out a way to have the tutors and the learners at different locations connecting through the internet. We've been able to spread that kind of service out all across Canada, actually. And then we've done a lot of our employment service work through partners in different parts of the country. Like in the interior, we got 2 or 3 partners where we deliver. We got a partner in Victoria. Likewise, out of the other regional offices, we have similar out of Regina. They've worked in many different urban centers and smaller centers in Saskatchewan. In particular, it does some really interesting work in northern Saskatchewan. And likewise in the Maritimes, reached out to all sorts of, I think they're in every little and not so little city and town in New Brunswick in some way. So yeah, we are learning how to go beyond the walls of our offices. And I'm not big on trying to set up new offices. If we want to expand our reach, I really believe in trying to partner and work with existing groups and existing places across Canada and bring whatever is value added into those.
If there's an organization out there that wants to partner with Neil Squire Society, who would they contact?
Well, at the risk of getting an 800
well, no, it's but okay, we don't have that many followers.
Okay, well, no, I mean, honest, probably, there's info at Neil Squire, that's watched very carefully, and there's there's 2 or 3 people that watch that carefully and make sure the emails get sent to the most appropriate people. And failing that, feel free to email me. Yeah, I mean, we're always open for the right opportunity to partner and see the ultimate goal of empowering persons with disabilities go forward. So, for sure. The other program that the Neil Squire Society has is called Working Together, and it's a program that we run nationally, and it's designed to help those that want to get into the workforce or return to the workforce and have a self-identified, self-declared disability, and we can help them both in terms of enhancing their employability skills and also helping them find work, get out there and connect with employers and find work opportunities. So that's a federally funded national program that if people are looking for that kind of assistance and engagement, then again, go to our website and just Google Neil Squire Society, and you can find the Working Together program. And it's a form of support that we've been doing for probably well over 20 odd years in different forms. And it's sort of the best of what we've learned put into one program.
Nice.
Okay, and we'll link to that all in the show notes. We'll link to Neil Squire and the different programs that we've talked about today. All right, well, fantastic. Well, thanks for stopping in, coming and see us.
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. Long overdue.
Absolutely.
And it's always fun to talk about technology and disability and other opportunities for disability. So I welcome the opportunity this morning. Thank you very much.
No problem. And I'm sure we'll have you back.
I'd love to come back.
Got to have some more tea.
And I'll hopefully be able to tell you just how great the whole lip sync Google project's going, because I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, for sure.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, maybe we can get you in for when.
And if people are interested, there's on our website, there's actually, in addition to our regular news bulletin that comes out every month or so, there's a more regular targeted little bulletin that comes out on the lip sync project for those that are really into the details of that project. You can subscribe to that, and that's a lot of fun too.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for having me.
All right. Excellent.
Alrighty.
Wow. That was really cool.
Yeah, I mean,
guys has so much going on.
I know. So many committees, so many different projects. When does he find time to sleep?
It was interesting to hear somebody talk about BCIs and the EEG devices and stuff that knows what they're talking about, because that stuff's really fascinating, but I get the sense that a lot of it is marketing hype too.
Right.
So it was interesting to hear that we're still a ways away from that, because if you look at the marketing materials of that stuff, they want you to believe that, thought control is almost here.
Right.
And clearly not.
Yeah, well, I mean, you wonder sometimes when you see companies that are driven by venture capital, whether or not the communication that they're putting out there about their product is legitimate or if it's just hype.
Right.
And clearly, in this case, it's probably a lot of hype.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate too, because the idea of having that brain interface is really quite appealing. Once that happens, once it becomes effective and controllable, and they work through the technical glitches of it, it's going to be a pretty powerful technology. Yeah,
oh, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a game changer, right up there with touchscreens. Really, it's probably going to be the next jump. I think virtual reality and that are the two next real big jumps that we're looking at. Maybe robotics as well. There's some pretty neat stuff going on there, but
yeah, I think more than virtual reality. Virtual reality to me has certain applications, particularly in terms of entertainment, and there are some applications in terms of design. But I think for your average person out and about, augmentative reality is going to be a huge thing coming down the pipe. Just being able to augment the information that you're getting and have, more access to what's going on around you, and perhaps even, safety protocols to say, hey, there's a bus coming. Things like that can be pretty powerful for people.
All right. Well,
if you have ideas for episodes, things that you would like to hear about, maybe it's a technology that you're hot on that you think would be really cool to have someone talk about. Maybe it's an organization that you're passionate about. Please email us. We have an email address. It is atbanterpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also contact us in a variety of other ways.
You can go to our website, which is www.atbanter.com. We've got a Facebook page. We have a Twitter feed.
Hey, did we get any action on Google+?
We didn't. I don't know. It's weird. I don't understand what's going on with Google+.
We said last episode that if we didn't get any action on Google+ in a week, we were going to nix the Google+ account.
That's true. It might be going. It might be the last casualty of 2016.
Could be.
From everybody here, which is me and Steve at the moment.
Because Ryan's got the day off.
He's got the week off.
He's got the week off. Lucky bum.
Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah. We should talk about Ryan behind his back, seeing as we've got this opportunity.
We should.
We don't know for sure that he'll listen to this episode, but we should put it in as an Easter egg. Let's make something up about Ryan and spread it as a rumor.
I like this idea. Okay, Ryan Fleury. Let's see.
Can't be anything illegal.
I know. That's what's holding me up. That's why the big pause. I was like, no, that's illegal. No, that's illegal. That's illegal in Texas.
Nothing's illegal in Texas.
Ryan Fleury is a vegan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Okay.
Ryan Fleury is vegan and is desperately seeking vegan recipes.
Oh, he is.
So please email Ryan any vegan recipes that you know. Even if it's like, okay, vegan carrots. 1, eat a carrot.
2, profit. That's right. Remember we had Alexis from Stump Kitchen?
That's right.
The vegan, she's way into vegan. It was his idea.
Yeah.
So clearly.
Yeah, he's got a soft spot for vegans, yeah.
Proof positive that he's a vegan.
Yeah.
So send in all those vegan recipes. I don't know where we were. I forget where I was at.
we were ending something.
I don't know. Okay. So for everybody here at AT Banter and Aroga Technologies across the country, we would just like to say Happy New Year. So I, throughout 2016, have been Rob Minot.
And I've remained Steve Barkley through all of 2016. And Ryan Fleury.
We don't know. He's a vegan.
He buggered off at the end of 2016.
That's right. Thanks, everybody.
This podcast has been brought to you by Aroga Technologies. Visit Aroga Technologies online at www.aroga.com. That's AROGA.com. Music provided by bensound.com.